song that we all just ended singing together, I'll Be Home for Christmas, was a 1943 hit that was first recorded by Bing Crosby. And it went all over the country because across the country, people had sons and daughters in World War II. World War II was blazing at the time in 1943. And the song, if you know the lyrics, is written as though it's a soldier writing his family saying, I'll be home for Christmas. And he starts making a list of requests. He says, make sure there's snow and mistletoe and presents under the tree, right? And then those words, the last line is so great. He says, I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. It's a powerful song, isn't it? And we all know it. We all remember it because everybody wants to be home, especially at Christmas time. If you think about it, the Christmas story is a come home story. And it starts with God coming to make his home among us, among humanity. If you want to look at your Bibles with me or just follow along, I want to go back to the text that Jennifer, our children's ministry pastor, just read. Luke chapter 2, we read, the time came for the baby to be born. And so Mary gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available. Verse 10, the angel said to the shepherds, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah. You'll find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. Verse 16, so they hurried off, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in a manger. So think about it with me. This is the Son of God, really God incarnate, comes and make his home in the middle of humanity. It's just a broke young couple gives birth to the God of the universe, and he makes his dwelling, makes his home among us. And then he invites, and then they start having people come into their small, simple home, people from all over the place coming in to this barn where the baby's in a manger. You may say today, well, what kind of home is that? And I think the Christmas story reminds us that home can be anywhere, as long as it's a place where you are loved and where you are wanted and where you are accepted and where people care about you. That's what we see in this Christmas story. If you think about it with me, I think I'm right when I say that maybe home is the most powerful word in any language. I think in English it is. Home is a powerful word. Whether you say it in Spanish, casa, or in French, maison, home makes us stop in our tracks. I don't care how old you are, what you've achieved, where you've gone, who you've become. That word home, it does something in our heart. And I say home is a powerful word because when you talk about home, it's the one place in this world where you can really be yourself. Isn't that true? You can stay in your pajamas till lunchtime. You can eat cereal for dinner, and nobody can tell you to eat broccoli. Home is that place where you can be yourself. Home is where you belong. Home is where you know people love you. Home is where you are prized. You know, a lot of times you go to work and people don't show you the respect you deserve and don't treat you right. But when you come home, everybody there knows just what a treasure you are to your family. Home is where you belong. It's where you are prized. Home is where you are safe, isn't it? I have 4 sons. And I learned early on that whenever they got in trouble, they thought if they could just make it home, then things would be okay. Years ago, we used to live in Wheaton, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. And of course, it snows like crazy every year. And so it was right around Christmas time, and I had my 2 oldest sons. They're like 6 and 4 years old at the time. We're out in the front yard making snowmen. A giant snowman, and I got cold, so I go inside to find some hot chocolate or something. I leave them there for just like 5 minutes. And then I hear the front door open and slam. So I look across the room, and they're standing there like they just stole something. And I said, hey, is everything all right? And they go, yeah, Dad, everything's fine. Well, then the doorbell rings. And I open the door, and there's this angry woman. It's Cruella de Vil, live and in the flesh, And I said, can I help you? And I can tell she's not happy about something. She said, do you know what your sons are doing? I go, yeah, they're making a snowman. She said, no, they're not. They're hiding behind that big tree, and they're throwing snowballs at cars, and they just hit my windshield. And I was like, ooh, I wanted to close the door and give them knuckles, right? But you have to act like the dad. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to take care of that. It won't happen again. And she starts to leave, and then she turns back around. She says, by the way, do you know your son has a really good arm? I said, darn right, Cruella. You know, you're right on that. But here's what my sons knew. If they just could make it home, everybody wants to make it home, then everything's going to be all right, especially at Christmas. When we read the Christmas story in Matthew, for example, in Matthew chapter 1, Joseph is told by an angel, he is told, take Mary home. That's the first thing he's told. You've got to take her home. And then when you read the account in Luke, Joseph is told, go to your home and take Mary with her to Bethlehem. And so he starts heading to Bethlehem, to his home there. Everybody, like I said, it doesn't matter who you are. We all want to go home. I think it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how dysfunctional your home may have been. It doesn't matter how much pain there's been in the past. It doesn't matter how broken at times home can be. Everybody still wants to go home because we know that when we get home, we are treasured and we are loved. I think the Christmas story, it reminds us, doesn't it, of our universal longing for home. I think as we live life, God gives us glimpses of our desire for home, because really it all points for our desire to be home with God in heaven. But I think we get these glimpses of home. I think even sports reminds us that home is a place we want to be. Writers and poets, for some reason, have a preference for baseball over football. And one writer writes about the differences between baseball and football. He says, for example, football is played in places like War Memorial Stadium and Soldier Field, and it's played in coliseums. Baseball is played on a diamond in a park. He says, football, for example, you make hits and you play smash mouth football and you tackle from the blind side. Baseball, you just tag people. In football, you have a helmet with a face mask and a mouth guard. In baseball, you just wear a cap. Football has downs, baseball has ups. Football has things like a 2-minute warning and sudden death overtime. Sounds very threatening. Baseball has a 7th inning stretch. You see, it's a kinder, gentler sport, isn't it? But the biggest difference maybe between football and baseball is the objective of the game. Because the objective of football is for your field general, the quarterback, to lead an offensive attack and for him to throw bombs and then have a ground attack while the defense is blitzing. That's football. Baseball, if you think about it, the entire goal of the game is to make it home. Isn't it true? You start at home, and then you leave home, and the whole entire point of the game is to make it safe back at home. And it reminds us of this universal longing that we all have to be home. I think, for example, when you read the Bible, you see this longing in practically every story that's in it. If you were to ask me, what is the Bible most about? I think maybe you could describe it like this, that it's this one long saga, this one long narrative story about humanity, the human race, trying to make it home to God. Because when you start in Genesis, you read about Adam and Eve leaving their home in this garden. And then everyone after them is trying to make it back home to God. You have Abraham looking for a home. You have Moses trying to lead a nation to find a home. And then we get to the Christmas story in Matthew and in the Gospels and in Luke. And we read about Mary and Joseph trying to make it home. Jesus, a few years later, when he could talk, not when he was baby Jesus, but a little bit older, he tells a famous come home story because he knows that everybody, especially at Christmas time, we know that everybody wants to make it home to God. And he tells this story about a son who runs away from home. And this son, after he runs away from home, he doesn't even have a home, a house to live in. What do we say? What do we say about people like that? We would say he's homeless. But it's a sad day when your son runs away from home. My family, I told you we have 4 sons, and it was a really tough day when one of them ran away from home. He was 4 years old, and he's just 4. And what happened is my wife came out of her bedroom, and she sees at the top of the stairs is my 4-year-old son in a jacket, and he's carrying a little suitcase, and he's heading down the stairs, which goes straight out the front door. And she said, "Spencer, where are you going?" And he literally says to her, he said, "I'm running away from home." You know, it's plain and simple. But she's really wise. She doesn't even ask him, "Why are you running away from home?" All she does is ask him one simple question. She said, "Spencer, when you wake up in the morning, who's going to make you Eggos?" It stopped him cold in his tracks, you know. It was like he didn't take another step. He turned around and went back and unpacked his suitcase. Because at home, it's where you belong. And when you belong there, you know there's people who love you and take care of you and make Eggos for you. That's what happens at home. When Mary and Joseph in this Christmas story get to Bethlehem, they don't have a warm, open, wide, or warm welcome waiting for them. We read this in Luke chapter 2, verse 7. We read, "Mary gave birth to her first son, wrapped him in cloths, laid him in a manger because there was no room for them." So Joseph has all of this family back in Bethlehem, and none of them want to take in the young engaged girl who's pregnant. And so they end up in a barn. Here's the thing about not having a home. You know, I said the son in the story that Jesus tells, he ends up homeless. And homelessness, yes, we think it's terrible, and it is because you don't have a house, you don't have a place to call home. But I wonder this. I wonder if worse than not having a place to sleep and call home, what's worse is you don't have a place where you belong. I think maybe the best thing about home is that it's the place where you belong and you're welcomed and you're wanted. Our family had a short period in our family story where you maybe could describe it as being homeless. A number of years ago, I decided to teach in Africa at African Bible colleges in Malawi, and so we sold our house. And the house sold quicker than I thought it would because I still had a whole semester to finish the coursework for my PhD. And so we couldn't leave the country yet, and so we started looking for a rental, and then one of our friends, one of my wife's friends said, "Why don't you guys just move in with us?" You know, it was a couple who we really liked, and they had kids our kids' ages. And I told my wife, I said, "No, this is a bad idea. You know that fish and house guests start to stink after 3 days, right? Is that what they say?" I said, "It's a bad idea." And she says, "No, we're great friends. It's going to be so much fun, and our kids are going to play together." And me, I'm thinking, oh, good, I'll save 5 months of rent because I was going to rent. And I'm the cheap guy. So I agreed. And here's the thing. Very quickly, it went bad. I mean, the party lasted about 2 weeks, and then one of our kids jumped off the kitchen counter, hit his head on a chandelier, and shattered the chandelier. It was an impressive leap. Don't get me wrong on that. We had one of the other kids takes a steak knife when we're not home, and he carves his initial on their priceless dining room table. I didn't even know he could spell his name, you know, but he carves it in there. And then our youngest kid, who was just crawling around, he gets a hold of a bunch of paper clips, opens the disk drive on their computer and stuffs them all in there, shoves it closed, and it shorts the whole thing out, fries it. It's there. All of their business records are on there. Here's the thing. We still had beds to sleep in, but you know you can tell when you're not wanted somewhere. And I just wanted to leave, but I couldn't. I couldn't wait to get on that plane to Africa. Because if you don't belong somewhere, it never can be home. I think our soul longs for a home. I think there's a lot of people who say, I believe in God, but have never found a place to call home like the Grove. I think churches, I feel how Gil feels. I feel like this is home. And I feel like churches, like the Grove, and I'm biased, of course, are a gift from God to all of us because there's people here that care about you and me. And it makes it our home. I think our soul longs for that. Our soul needs that. There are some people who say they believe in God, but they bounce from church to church, or they very rarely come, but never dive in and make it home. And this Christmas, one of my invitations is, if you don't have a place to call home and worship God, then make this your home. In Jesus' story about the son, I said that the son had run away from home, but then Jesus in his story says that when the son had been away for a while, he catches a disease. It's a sickness. It's a virus. It's a strange virus that you only catch when you leave home. It's called homesickness. Maybe you've heard of it. If any of you have left home for any length of time, you realize you start to have this longing deep inside. I need to be home. You can be staying in the Four Seasons in Maui, and if you're there too long, you start to feel homesick. And so the son starts to want to come home, but he's not sure if they'll take him back. He's wondering, if I try to go back, will they let me back? And I just want to say tonight, I want to remind you of this, is that home is where they always take you back. It's that one place on earth. In fact, there's one writer that says it like this: home is a place that when you go there, they have to take you in. I think that's God's idea, because it's like the story Jesus is telling. The Father is waiting. He's scanning the horizon. He can't wait for his son to come home. It might have even been Christmas time. And I don't think he just wants to welcome him back. I think it's more than that. I think he wants to protect him. There's a Hebrew ceremony, a tradition called kizaza. And maybe you haven't heard of this, but what used to happen is if a Hebrew son or daughter left the village or left the town to go live in a Gentile community or in another place, in another country, if they tried to come back home, back to the village, people would meet them at the town gate, and they would say, kizaza. Kizaza means broken. And they'll say, you have broken our community. Then they would literally take a clay jar and break it in front of them. And they say, you have broken our community, and it can't be put back together. You have broken our family, so you are not welcome home. That's kizaza. I think the story in Jesus, the father in Jesus' story, did not want anyone to say this to his son. So he's watching for him. He's waiting for him. The son, we read, prepares a speech. He has a short little speech that he's going to give. He's going to try to explain how he went wrong. And he's bracing for the people of the town to reject him when he gets there. But there's one thing that the son does not count on. He does not count on a father who always wants him to come home. And this is this great picture of our Father in heaven. And so his father is scanning the horizon, and he sees his son in the distance. He can spot his own son from a mile away, and so can you. He knew his walk. He knew his gait. He knew what his messy hair looked like. He just needed a silhouette. And we read that he starts to run towards his son, to welcome him home and to stop anyone else from saying to the son, you can't come back. Because like God, our Father in heaven, we can always come back home. That's what I hope you get today. It doesn't matter how far you've gone, where you've been, you can always come back home. And so the Father, when he reaches the Son, he throws his arms around him and he embraces him. And isn't that what the Christmas story is all about? Is about God saying, welcome home. He says that to all of us. And maybe you've been that person that has been far from God. Maybe you have physically stayed away from church, but your heart has been a million miles from God. I want to say today on this Christmas Eve, it doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter who you've hurt. Maybe you've lived a lifestyle that you've been ashamed of. Or maybe you've had this secret life that even the people close to you don't know about, but it's hurting them deeply. I want to say this Christmas, welcome home. Your Father in heaven is saying, come back. I'll always take you back. That to me is the best part of the Christmas story. Would you bow your heads with me? And if you've never prayed this prayer, I want to invite you to pray it in your heart tonight. God, I need to come back home to you. I have been far away, and I have been wrong, and I am sorry. And so, God, I want you to know that I believe in your Son, Jesus Christ, that he came to save me, to save our world. And so, God, on this Christmas Eve, I want to come home to you. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer, then God, your Father in heaven, says you are home now.